So this is how I see technology nowadays. At least the sort of personal devices, the way we use it every day in our own personal ways. Imagine that you are wrapped up, you're swaddled in this fluffy blanket, and you have your eyes closed, and everything just feels really comfortable and wonderful, and you feel protected from the whole world. And you're just sort of in this half dream state. And you're like that indefinitely until one day you open your eyes for whatever reason and you see that you're not wrapped in a warm blanket. You're actually wrapped in the tentacles of some giant monster. And its arms are just coiled around every limb. And if you imagine like the arms of an octopus, all the suckers on its arms, they have all these spikes coming out of them and they're all embedded in your flesh and they're just sucking the blood out of every part of you. And the mouth of the monster is at the back of your head, just sucking your brains out. And it's just sucking every fiber of your being, every bit of happiness and everything true in life. It's just sucking it dry. And you start panicking. You start freaking out. You're like, please, no, let me go. Let me out. I have dreams to achieve and a life to live. And you start panicking. And then this man comes up and he's dressed in a suit and he's smoking some kind of e-cigar or something. And he says, or he is modern society. And he comes up and he says, sir, calm down. Take a look around. And so you look out and it's just this ocean of people. And every single one of them has this giant monster just clung to the back of them, just choking them out. But they all have their eyes closed and they're all just smiling. And they look at you and they wave and they say, isn't this great? And and the guy's like, he looks at you and he's like, there's no use in struggling. This is how things are now. This is the way of the future. You can't fight it. There's no use in trying. And so the monster looks at you with its glowing blue eyes, and you start to fall into a trance, and you think, well, it's not that bad. And you start to fall asleep again, and your eyes closed, and you're gone. You're right back asleep in your warm, fluffy blanket. So that's how I see our
Bravo.
personal tech uses.
That was really
Now,
something.
this episode is not about how to kill your monster. It's more about how to either make peace with your monster or train your monster. How to set boundaries with your monster. I kind of wish it was about killing your monster, but we're not quite there. Without taking some drastic measures, it's a bit hard to end up in a place where there is no monster. I think we all kind of have to come to terms with just where technology is. But yeah, this episode will be about how to train your monster.
Man, that was great. I really enjoyed that. I like that it
Thank
was
you.
subtle, not too over the top or anything.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to follow that. All right. The plan for today, as Dan so vividly illustrated, is that we've talked about tech a lot, and mostly the take has been just that it's bad and you should not use it, which could have been a little bit one-dimensional, maybe. We took that approach with the phones, right? We said, oh, we put away our phones for a week and it was amazing, life-changing, blah, blah, blah. But we're going to take another pass at this and try to really get into it and try and discuss, as you said, how to live with it, because that is the reality for 99 plus percent of people, is that you have to live with tech. I do. That's my job. It's a lot of my hobbies. It's actually how I connect with a lot of friends that aren't from around here or don't live near me. So it's just kind of a non-negotiable thing. I have to live with the octopus monster horror movie thing.
And I feel like we don't even really need to say it, but clearly there's a lot of good things about technology.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the efficiency of the phone and the computer were born out of just that, of efficiency. But there's so many horrible things that come along with it. I feel like we don't even need to preface this conversation with that, but just so we don't sound like technology haters, although I
Right.
feel like that's kind of impossible when you're on the computer doing
Right.
a show.
And you can be
Uh,
self-hating. Doesn't matter.
but yeah.
All right. Well, this is going to seem so underwhelming compared to your imagined scenario, but let me give you
spice it up a bit.
No, this is it's too late. I already thought about this. It's been rehearsed in my head. For the last 2 months now, actually, I've been almost entirely focused on this problem. We had laid out our plans for the first 3 months of the year. I did a couple other things for the first 2 months, and then month three was deal with the tech problem, figure out how to be on a computer all day and not feel like my brain is getting pulled apart. And that was a almost complete failure for March. I just did not approach it the right way. Without even really realizing it, I was trying to rely very much on willpower and just do better type stuff, which did not work. So this month, at the beginning of the month, I had laid out all these different little habits that I wanted to work on for the next 3 months. And we were talking about this. I was thinking, should I do like one a week? Should I start with all of them and just cold turkey try this stuff? And after a day or two, I kind of decided, nope. The only thing I want to worry about is this, the tech problem, because it is so overwhelming in terms of its impact to me that journaling, meditating, all of those things, those are great. I'm going to work on those soon, but I don't think any of it really compares to how big of a deal this is. So I've been really, really working at this. And this month has been infinitely more productive than the last month. So I had to think about it differently. And I basically asked the question, why is it that I can sit down with an e-reader on the couch and read for an hour and feel great? Feel like I did something that was rewarding and had depth to it, whether I'm reading fiction, nonfiction, whatever. It feels really good, like a good experience. I get up, walk away, and go, glad I spent that hour. I can do the same thing on a phone, even sitting down with the intent of reading, and I walk away an hour later and feel like garbage. And it's the same thing. It's a small device that I'm staring at.
Are you saying you read for that whole hour, or are you saying with the phone
No,
you would end up not reading?
Did not read for that hour. I did other things. But it's still remarkable how something that physically seems so similar can cause me to mentally feel so different. And here's something that I also thought was very interesting. So sometimes at night, going to bed, on my way to sleep, I'll watch something on the phone. I don't really do this much anymore, but I used to, and I actually still do this occasionally. And I think now that I've thought about it more, I've kind of got it a little more figured out. But if I watched a replay, I'm an ultra nerd and I watch things like competitive StarCraft. So if I'm watching a replay of a StarCraft tournament or a streamer, I'll sit there and I'll be watching it and I'll get sleepy and I'll fall. Sometimes I'll drop the phone on my face or whatever, but I'll fall asleep like just naturally, and then I'll put the phone away and go to sleep. If I'm watching something live, that doesn't happen. I feel very awake. And occasionally I'll, engage in chat, put something in there, ask a question to the streamer. And that, I'm awake for an hour by doing that. But even if I don't, even if I'm not typing anything, I'm not interacting, but I know that I can, I am so much more alert and awake laying in bed like that. And it becomes much harder to fall asleep, which is amazing because it feels like almost exactly the same thing. But there's something different happening there psychologically. Anyway, let me get to this. I have this mental model now for the way I've been thinking about it. Let me just give it to you. So in the real world, the normal physical world where you go out and do stuff, you can divide the universe into two pieces. If you stretch your arms out, maybe you lean in either direction and where your fingertips go, you can define this bubble around you. That's your personal space. And then everything outside of that, yeah, that's it. So that's one section of the universe in that space. Your computer sort of exists inside of that, your microphone, your headphones, whatever's on your desk. Okay, so that's one section of the universe. And the other section is everything else. They're not quite equal in size. And when things are in your personal space, and we've discussed this a long time ago, but there's science around this. This has been studied and observed, and you can certainly observe it in your own experience. When something is in your personal space, your relationship to it changes, where it is so accessible that you hardly even have to think about the way that you use it. You know, I have a cup of tea and a glass of water, and I drink from those unconsciously. They're in my personal space. It does not require any conscious thought. I don't have to do anything. I just do it. And so I do it thoughtlessly without any conscious effort. That would happen if you had a book, would happen if you were, playing it with a deck of cards. You just interact with it that way. Okay, obvious. So the natural world has this fundamental quality to it where when something is in your personal space, it becomes very easy to interact with. You have this very intimate relationship with it, but you're very limited on your personal space. I can have a handful of things around me, but if I start trying to collect all my possessions and get it inside this bubble, it becomes completely impractical. I can't get it physically there. So for the most part, you might have a couple things that are accessible to you, that you interact with in this very unconscious, intimate way. But if you want to do something else, you have to physically get up and move your personal space over somewhere else. So if I decide that, I don't want to read this book anymore and I want to go be in the park, then I have to get up and I have to move and put on a jacket and shoes and go walk out there, right? So I think of this property of the natural world, it has some very important consequences. One of the biggest ones is that it creates a little bit of friction between doing one thing and doing something else. It's not a lot necessarily, it's not painful, but if I want to stop reading this book and I want to go be in the park, it requires some conscious decisions for me to get up and move. And that's just the nature of everything. If I want to talk to a friend, I have to go physically locate or relocate myself and find this friend and talk to them. And then if I want to stop talking to them, then I have to move again. And it has this side effect of it causes activities to kind of pool up a little bit. I think of this like the tide pools at the beach. And you've seen this, you grew up in Florida, same as me. The tide comes out, the water, it kind of gets stuck in these little puddles everywhere. And inside of each one, really cool things can happen. There can be starfish or a bunch of crabs and shells and things like that. And they can be really interesting. And so the friction between me being here reading a book and me going somewhere else, it kind of naturally keeps me here. Where I might be reading that book, I might get to a part that's, let's say, a little bit boring. I might feel this little impulse to, this is a little bit boring. I'd kind of rather be somewhere else. But the fact that I have to get up, close the book, remember my spot, put in a bookmark, go somewhere else, that's enough to where it kind of dampens that. It's like, that's fine, I'll just keep reading. And so I very naturally move right past those little tiny moments of impulse to do something else, and it keeps me there for a reasonable amount of time. Just like these tide pools at the beach, the sand kind of keeps them boxed in where cool stuff can happen. Without that, everything just sort of mixes together and washes right back out, and you have nothing. So that's my visual for the real world. And taking that and trying to think about what technology is doing through that lens or that picture, to me, reveals the major problem that we're facing. The side effects that we experience come from that. In that, in a sense, if you think about technology, a computer, tablet, phone, what we're really trying to do, what we've been working on for so long, is to take that bubble and blow it up until we can fit the entire universe inside of it. We want everything that exists to be accessible to you in its incredibly easy, intimate, does not require hardly any conscious thought type of way. Just that bubble is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And everything we do around tech is either expanding the bubble or trying to smooth down any last little bit of friction or edge or anything to where you can move from one thing to the next. And of course, we're trying to make things more interesting and more novel. We're applying the absolute state of the art machine learning algorithms to the YouTube recommendation engine and to the TikTok recommendation engine and all of those things. Like we're just creating this unfathomable ease of moving from one thing to another. So in the technology world, you lose this property of the natural world, which is things exist in your personal space. You engage with them in an intimate way. But then if you want to change what you're engaging with, you have to exert some form of physical effort. And I feel like I've been talking for a while.
No. I like your little pool metaphor.
Yeah.
I have definitely noticed this with me is if I'm sitting at my desk, I do desk things. Like I'll get on the computer, I'll look at my computer, or if there's anything in reach, that's what I do, and my brain is fully submerged in this little pool. And then if I get up, shut the computer off, and I go sit down in my chair, well, then everything in reach of that chair becomes what my brain is thinking about. I have my art books, I have my sketchbook, I got all this stuff surrounding the chair. And that's where, I can think and be productive. And if I go to the kitchen, if I just get up and walk to the kitchen, I have it, then I do kitchen things. I think about cleaning the kitchen, or I think about getting food out of the fridge or whatever. Your brain totally switches. There's so many times I'm in the kitchen, doing dishes or something, and I think, oh, I gotta get a coffee cup from my office or something. So I walk to my office, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting down at my chair and I'm doing chair things. Yeah. I've changed pools. But I guess another way of looking at your metaphor is if I take the phone with me, I am taking this, well, as you called it, a giant sponge with me, and I go to a new pool and it just soaks up everything because the phone is so full of so many different fascinating things. It just soaks everything up and dries everything else up in reach. And so if I sit at my chair, even though there's a bunch of cool art books and a sketchbook and all the things I want to be doing, if my phone is in my hand, well, then it just soaks up everything and just everything goes into that, and I stop thinking about everything else. And then I stand up and I walk somewhere else, and I still have my phone with me, and it soaks that up. And I just, everywhere I go, it's that same thing. I can't see any of the interesting things in any of the pools because the phone just soaks it all up.
Yeah. And that's been my quest this month, is to figure out how do I deal with this? How do I work with this device? I mean, we completely take it for granted now, but if you really stop and think about how insane technology actually is, it's staggering the amount that you can do with it. I mean, we live across the country and we're having a real-time conversation, and that's going to get uploaded to somewhere where anyone in the world can listen to it across all different platforms on their wireless headphones while they're out on a walk with this battery powered device the size of the palm of your hand. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and you can see those, like the younger kids are like, "Ah, you old bastards, you think it's bad to spend time on technology or watch TikTok all day. I'm going to go watch TikTok all day, and that's the future." Well, in some ways they're kind of right, but at the same time it's like, well, hold on a minute. This stuff is not as normal as you think. We have had these same devices around for quite a while now. We've had the phones and we've had the computers, but think back like 10 years. The actual stuff you did on these devices were totally different, completely different. I mean, I was thinking back, about 10 years ago, maybe a little less, where I was writing music on my little black MacBook laptop.
I remember that MacBook. I like that. That was cool.
Oh my God, this was almost 20 years ago. Jesus Christ. Okay, well, anyway, I was I took this computer to the park, and I would sit there and I would write lyrics on it. I would write music. And to me, it felt like just a journal or something. It wasn't anything that much different from that because, well, for one, I don't think I had internet when I'm at the park, but
No way.
I would also take it to a coffee shop and write stuff there. But if you think about the internet or the things that were actually on the computer to distract you, it was, I don't know, MySpace, which wasn't much different from like a Discord nowadays. You just have your friends
Hmm.
and that's about it. There's no like constant ads of stuff trying to suck you in. There's no like there isn't some giant algorithm, which is probably why it failed. There wasn't some algorithm to just constantly grab your attention. Facebook was starting to become a thing, but not really. Reddit wasn't around, or maybe it was, but no one knew about it. There were no there's just nothing like that. YouTube was around, but it was not at all the way it is today.
Do you remember
They
the
didn't
video
have
quality when YouTube came out?
Yeah, it was like
Horrifying. It was 50 pixels by 50 pixels. You could barely tell what was even happening. I doubt many people remember that, but
yeah. Oh, I remember it. And it felt more wholesome. Everything online felt, I mean, back then I probably wouldn't have said this, but looking back now compared to what it is now, it was wholesome. It was totally different. And so you can look at things and be like, well, we've had phones and computers around for a long time, but the state that we're in now, this is new. This is not like we've been wrapped in that fuzzy blanket and felt comfortable for a while. But wake up and look around. This is some crazy shit. This is
yeah.
this is a lot going on, and
you
we
have to
absolutely
think
take
about,
it for granted.
yeah, and you have to think about AI on top of that. Like we're accelerating into a whole new era that
Yeah. Yeah. We're just even ignoring that, looking at where we are now, it's
yeah.
insane. Yeah, and so it's sort of like, you know, when fast food started being a thing, everyone's like, "Oh, this is great. This is wonderful." And everyone's eating fast food, and then years later, people are thinking, "Wait a minute. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea."
Yeah.
Or, you know, with smoking, all of a sudden, you know, mass production of cigarettes. And then people step back later and they're thinking, maybe this wasn't the right thing, even though it was super efficient and made a lot of sense and we made a ton of money off of it. Maybe it wasn't so good.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that is, there's going to be some, hopefully, there'll be some kind of backlash against this technology that is sucking everyone's brains out. And because there seems to be a growing demand for this type of thing where you want the technology to work with you. And I know, you know, Apple's, I'm sure all of them are kind of doing some things. Like Apple has like the focus time now or whatever.
Yeah. And I want to talk about that.
Okay. I have a feeling you probably hate it, right?
Yes.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, cool. I'm excited to talk about it. But anyway, hopefully the big companies start to see, oh, there's a growing demand for this type of thing. People don't want to be addicted to their phones and computers. But anyway, okay.
No, and I think that's a fantastic point to bring up is that one, it has not been that long. I lived my childhood without phones and with marginal access to a personal computer. We had a family computer. It was only powered on some of the time. If you wanted to get on the internet, you had to fire up the dial up. It kicked your mom off the phone. She got mad. It was a whole deal. So even then, like I lived without it, but even when smartphones showed up, it was very, very limited. There wasn't even an app store on the original iPhone. It was just Apple's default apps, and you had a web browser that was awful, ridiculously slow. Anyway, totally agree. So, all right. My project has been to try and live with this stuff, to try and figure out how to exist. And I want to talk about the phone for just a minute because I actually haven't made a ton of progress on that. And I want to just set that aside a little bit. I have had the phone plugged into the wall pretty much this entire month with a couple little exceptions here and there. But for the most part, it's been plugged into the wall. And I had a bit of a mini revelation with that. So I was thinking about how if I plug my phone in on the countertop next to the coffee maker, and I go sit down on the couch, there's two things that happen where I feel this urge to want my phone with me. One is that I get impulses to do random shit. I want to Google something. I want to buy something on Amazon. Some of it is seemingly positive, like, oh, I want to learn this fact, like, it's for informational purposes. I feel like I'm arguing with my dad, which is me in this scenario, like, I should be able to use it. I want to look this up. And in reality, it's very easy to just write something down on a little notebook that I'm supposed to have with me all the time and go actually learn that stuff later. But then I would have to really think about it and probably remember it and engage with it. And I don't really want to do that. What I really want to do is be distracted from whatever it is I'm doing that I don't want to do. Okay, so there's that thing that makes me want the phone. There's another thing that makes me want the phone. And this is, what if my wife texts me and she's stuck somewhere?
All right.
Or what if a good friend of mine wants to catch up and I haven't talked to them in a while? Or just in general want to communicate with people that I know. They ask me something, or hey, what's up? And I would want to respond to that. And in my mind, that's an amazing part of technology. I really, really like that. I like being able to talk to somebody and connect with them. And certainly if my wife is stuck somewhere, miserable and stranded, she does not want to be there for 3 hours and then find out that I was just sitting around not using my phone like some weirdo because I've got this podcast thing where we make up weird rules for ourselves. So there's that also makes me want the phone. And so my thinking was, I have to deal with this somehow because this is just not sustainable. We had somebody who was talking to us about how her cat got stuck in a wall next to a cabinet, and how that's a terrible call to get, and things turned out fine, but it's very nerve-wracking. But also, if you're somebody who's like, oh, I don't use my phone, I left it at home, then you don't get that call and there's nothing you can do, and that's a pretty hard thing to just decide you're going to live with. So I have a fitness watch, and this actually took some effort, but I went through and figured out how to filter different notifications from the phone to the watch. In the past, I've had a lot of trouble with this because it's inconsistent, where the watch isn't always connected, and so it just misses some. And I'm very lucky that this model that I have now, which no particular endorsement, but this is the Forerunner 255. It's been working well for me, at least. This seems to get consistent connections. And so I went through everything, figured out how to get the notifications dialed in correctly to where there are specific people and groups that I get wrist-based notifications from. And it's like you have to trust that this is going to work. And the trust is very important, where if I sit down and I don't really believe that I'm going to get the important notifications, then I wind up just kind of going back and checking and having the phone with me. I had to sort of test it until I got to the point where I'm like, yeah, this will work. I get the notifications that I need to, and now I can sit on the couch. I know that this stuff that I was worried about is still going to get to me, but the only thing I'm left dealing with is that impulse thing, and that is the thing that I want to try and take care of. So that has been the key thing for me with the phone. But that's mostly all I want to say about phones, because I want to talk about desktop computing and everything I've done there, because that's been my project for the whole month. I've been designing this entirely new desktop experience to try and make this feel more like that physical reality of being in a world with limited physical space.
Let's not leave the phone just yet.
Okay, fair enough.
Your mentality is separate out the stuff that I really need it for, like the actual important stuff. Mm-hmm. If you get a call from your wife that she's stuck somewhere, you want to get that call, and that is an absolute need for you to need to carry around the phone. But if you can separate that out into something else, then you get to let go of all of the negative stuff that is also in the phone. And I think that's what we've kind of both been doing for the last year or two, is separating out the needs of the phone, especially the simple ones. If you need a timer, you pull out your phone and use it as a timer. Well, right. Then you also spend time, going through your phone. But if you just get a little timer, like our little Pomodoro timers, then you don't have to use your phone for a timer. You use the timer, and you can leave your phone on a desk somewhere or outside of your reach. But if you start thinking about all the things your phone can do, I mean, it has a flashlight, it has a calculator, it has the timer, it has an alarm, it has a calendar, it's got everything. And so I think both of us have been doing this a bit in the last year or two, is separating out some of those things. We both have alarm clocks now, right? You don't use your phone for alarm clock
Actually,
in the morning.
keep talking because I'll tell you what I do for that.
Okay. Well, I have 2 alarm clocks and they are not my phone. I leave my phone in my office and I sleep in a separate bedroom. So my phone is not in that room. I just use alarm clocks. I now have timers instead of using my phone for a timer, because that was a big one. I'm always using timers. So I just got a separate timer. I keep a journal now, a paper and pen journal. So I don't have to use as many notes in my phone. I still do use some notes for some things in my phone, but a lot of times I just jot them down in my journal. I printed out a calendar now that I put up on my bulletin board, which I like way more because it's physically there. I can see it every time I walk into my office. There's all kinds of things I've started separating out of my phone, and that drastically lowers the need for you to pick up your phone. All of the good excuses you have. Oh, well, I need it because, it's for a good reason. I want to save someone if they need help. Well, yeah, of course. I haven't solved that one yet. I don't have a watch, and I really don't want one. But that's a problem I need to solve. But
should get a pager.
Yeah, I think about getting a dumb phone a lot, but and the phone also has a camera. You could carry around a camera, but just starting to kind of see the different elements that make up the all-powerful phone, and separating them, I think can help a lot.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And in fact, I don't want to talk about this for too long because I really do want to talk about the desktop PC thing, but I have a second phone. I have 1,000 phones. I look through a drawer and there's just, I could build a house out of these.
They're not all working, right?
No, a lot of them are working.
Yeah,
well
but
enough.
I mean, you're not using them, right?
Well, so I have a phone that is in the bedroom, and I call it my safe phone, and it has a video player that can play downloaded video files. So if there is, let's say, a YouTube video that I want to watch, I have to download it. YouTube-DL is how you do that, if anybody's curious. It's a little tool that will download any YouTube video, or really any video on the internet you point it to, which is fantastic. And I have this little file sync set up to where I can download something, put it on the phone. But that means that if I'm sitting there on the phone and I decide I want to watch a video, I can't. I have to deliberately download one and transfer it to the phone so that I can watch it. It has a nutrition tracker because I still on a specific diet, so I can use it to do that kind of stuff. It has the little flashlight, the timer, the alarm, all that stuff, but nothing else. There's no web browser, there's no chat interface, there's no anything, nothing that I can get kind of wandered into and lost with. So I call that my safe phone. And if I want to use it, let's say Sam goes to bed early, and I don't usually go to bed until around 10:45, and she's wiped out, goes to bed at 9:45, and I'm like, I'll go to bed too. Why not? I can't have the lights on reading a book, but I can use the phone. It's a great time to do something on the phone, like read or watch a video. Well, I have my safe phone. I can take it there, and it does not suffer from all the same problems as another phone. So that's a possibility, I think, of having a second phone that has been sanitized.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But just to agree with you, though, I mean, I have my journal right here. I still use this all the time, every day. This is the little Pomodoro timer where you just tilt it and it starts the timer.
Mine broke, so I got a different brand. But yeah,
I love this, but it could be better. I wish somebody would fix some of the problems with this. But even so, in its flawed state, I still really enjoy using it. I really like physical items. There is something very tactile and rewarding about that. I think maybe human beings have a little bit of wiring that causes them to enjoy physical items more than
you think
just this flat smeared pane of glass infested with ads and dark patterns. But digress. Okay.
Right.
So that's been the deal with the phone. And really the major thing was figuring out that problem of the important stuff that I really do want to get. I still get that. And now I can comfortably put it down and not use it and not feel like, I'm risking missing something important. Okay. My desktop experience. This has been the major project. Now I want to preface this by saying I am the type of weirdo who uses Linux, and I have my own desktop environment set up. And so a lot of what I'm going to talk through won't be obviously usable on macOS or Windows. I think from the basic principle standpoint, I'm hoping that will be pretty clear, and maybe you could set up something like this. But Linux is also free, and I understand I know, just let me finish the sentence. I know how annoying that is. It would take a very large time investment, maybe not very large. It would take a time investment for somebody to set this up. But you could, in theory, have your computer dual boot, where you could boot into Windows and you could also boot into Linux. And I know that that's way outside the realm of what most people are interested in doing. But if you are like me, and you're someone who really struggles with this, I mean, the tech usage problem is a very major thing in my life. It's probably worth thinking about. Trying to make that problem much better is worth investing many hours into, from my view, because it's made me genuinely happier and more productive and more focused, and I feel so much better.
Okay. I predict that you might convert maybe 1 or 2 people to Linux, but the majority of people like me are not going to go out and do that. So think about the concepts that, or I'm most interested. I am most interested not in the little code or whatever you use to make Linux do something cool, but more about your thinking behind it. What is it that you're actually after? What is happening in your brain? Not so much how cool Linux is.
Oh, well, because that sucks, because I was going to read through my config files line by line, because I'm sure everyone's interested. Yeah, of course I'm going to talk about conceptually
what's
happening.
It's sarcastic. That's what I was expecting.
Right. Well, I'm not. Okay. I chose not to.
But I am a bit excited about this, yeah.
Okay. Well, and I really do want to say this. I know it feels drastic, but if you can't figure it out, consider it. This is a big deal. It really is. Okay. So again, back to that visual of your personal space and things being outside your personal space, and there's that little bit of friction and conscious effort to move from one place to another. That to me is the main problem with a piece of technology, is that really isn't there. If you think about the space that you exist in on a desktop, you have what is called a stacking window manager, which is this visual metaphor for all the different programs you have, where if you open a window, it shows up on your screen. You can open another window and you can move it around in that sort of, if we call up the y-axis, you're moving it around in xy space. And you also have this depth to it. So you can take your windows and place them anywhere inside this 3-dimensional space. And it even extends beyond the borders of your screen, because you can put a window kind of off to the side. Maybe you have just a little edge that's kind of peeking through your screen. So you have this big space behind it. And then I believe Windows and macOS work this way, but you have different workspaces.
Continue. There's just a mosquito in here.
Oh, is this the fly episode of Breaking Bad?
Yes. Just don't mind me if I start.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I did forget what I was talking about. Oh, okay. I believe that both Windows and macOS have this, but there's different workspaces where you can take that 3D space and shove it off to the side, and you move into a brand new one, and you can put other things there. So you kind of get to slide, between these different spaces, right? You have that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. I don't know. I don't really use Windows. I use macOS some. But there's also, it even goes beyond that, where you can take a program that's open and you can minimize it so it kind of shrinks down, so it gets out of your way visually, but it's still running, it's still passing notifications through, and it's only one click to bring it back. So it still kind of exists inside that almost unconscious personal space. And then of course you take a web browser, and that does kind of that inside of itself, where it captures the entire internet and puts it in front of you, and there's only a couple keystrokes, it auto completes to get to a web URL, or you have bookmarks and things, you click on something, it opens something, it has different tabs, it all kind of keeps it there, and you're essentially building this gigantic nest of things that exist inside of that personal space. Now my setup was slightly different, but for now it doesn't really matter. Essentially I'm using a two-dimensional system with many, many workspaces, and it effectively did the same thing, where I can have lots and lots of things open, and I can instantly move between them, and they're all running, even if they're not directly in front of me, and they send me notifications, and it just winds up where I'm existing in this world where there's just all of this stuff. And of course, the web browser is like the ring of power. It's just so astoundingly good at this, at taking everything that exists and putting it right there, right in front of you. So I had to rethink this a lot. So I kind of took some inspiration from your having the computer shut off, in the sense that I wanted to make it, I didn't want the computer off, but I wanted it in a mode that, as much as possible, did not suffer from this problem. And if I needed to get back into a full-blown get to do everything mode, I have to close out of everything, not necessarily reboot in this case, but like log out, log back in a new mode, put in a password. So it's a hassle to get into like unrestricted mode. So what I have now is, so I use what is called a tiling window manager, but all that means is that there's no more depth to the desktop. Now, if you open a window, it occupies the entire screen. And if you open a second window, it causes that window to shrink down to half size, and it then occupies half of the screen. So they have to share. And if you open a third window, it causes one of those to become half size, and it has to share there. And if you have four, you have these four little tiles.
I like that. That's
yeah,
cool.
and if you open 8, you have 8 tiny little tiles across your desktop. And there's no...
Sorry, that's, I mean, I'm sure you made this connection, but that's a great visual of how I think your brain works too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no such thing as workspaces. So I can't cheat by going to the next one and opening something else and having all these things coexisting at the same time. There's only one. So essentially, the size of my screen, that is the amount of space that the computer has. If a program wants to run, it has to occupy a piece of that space, in the same way that if you want to have a book on your desk, it has to occupy a physical space on the desk. And somehow I disabled stacking books on top of each other. There's no full screen, because that's cheating. That lets you, take something and let it overlay other things. So there's no ability to full screen anything. And there's also no ability to minimize something. So if a program is running at all, it has to take up real estate. It can't be running in the taskbar, just waiting to show you a notification, kind of existing and ready to distract you cognitively. And part of that is that it can't communicate with you. It has to be closed. And when you open it, you have to go through the opening process and log in, or whatever it is you have to do to open a program. And it has to push apart other things on your screen. But I've also found that it kind of taps into that thing that I was describing, where I can watch a replay on the phone and I feel relaxed and even sleepy. But if I'm watching something live, it like nags at me, because I know that there's people talking and I can communicate with. I know that that person is really there and I could interact with them. When a program is closed entirely, it psychologically feels different than if it's running in the background. Mm-hmm. It's hard to really pinpoint exactly why, but it really does. So that's the desktop interface. And I've also disabled the mouse entirely. So it's keyboard only. And
why did you do that?
Well, so the disabling the mouse obviously would not work for everyone, and it doesn't work for me all the time. Sometimes I have to have a mouse to just do very basic things. If I'm trying to do a graphical mock-up, I can't do that on a keyboard. But I kind of think of it like security clearance at some government agency, where if you hire some temp to scrub the bathrooms or something, like, you don't give a 16-year-old temp security clearance to the nuclear launch silo because they don't need it and there's a risk. So they get security clearance to go to wherever they need to go to do their job. And then somebody who's a little higher up, they get more security clearance. So I kind of thought of myself that way, where if I am going to open the computer and my intention is to do coding where I'm typing text, and I might make some notes and do some planning for the day, maybe even do emails and stuff like that, or even communicate, maybe over, text type stuff, then that's my intention. That's what I want. And I don't want any ability to do anything else, because why have it? So I have no mouse mode. And that's always how I start the day on the computer, is there is no mouse. The screen estate is extremely limited. There's no ability to background any programs. Everything has to be opened and I can interact with it, and then it has to be closed out if I want to open something else. And that's the mode that I'm in. And then I have a second mode, kind of the mid security clearance mode, where I have the mouse and I can use the mouse. And really all that does is it, one, creates more friction, which is good, because again, I want to have to be conscious about moving from one thing to another. And then the biggest thing it does is it makes it really hard to do the type of stuff that tends to be distracting. So web browsing is a lot harder if you don't have a mouse. Goofing around on Discord is a lot harder if you don't have a mouse. Although I found some terminal-based tools where you can actually navigate purely with a keyboard and do like a text-based interface, which is kind of fun and very less distracting than if you're using a graphical interface. So that's my safe mode for the computer. The big thing that I found with this is that it does what I was describing with the physical world, in that part of the problem that you encounter on a major part of the problem is not just that you can context switch. If it's easy to move from one program to another, one browser tab to another, then you move throughout the universe effortlessly and unconsciously. But the other thing that happens there, jump back to the physical world reading a book thing, is that if you want to go do something else, you don't just have to take the physical effort of getting up and moving somewhere else. You also have to make a conscious choice to say, I'm done reading this book right now. And almost always you're going to think about that and go, I'll finish the chapter, or I'll at least read to the page break or the end of the paragraph at the very least. You kind of want to find some sort of stopping point, and then you take your bookmark and you put it in there and you maybe set the book somewhere. And there is some process of saying, yes, I am done with this book. And then you usually have a moment of moving your body around, and you get to think a little bit about what you just read. That's a very underappreciated but amazing thing. Part of memory, right? Recalling, processing, that kind of stuff. But there is closure to that activity. On a computer or on a phone, you don't have that, because you're doing something in a browser tab, and then either you get an impulse and so you initiate this process of opening a new tab, or something grabs your attention, you see a message, notification, doesn't matter, and then you go jump into a new tab. So not only are you very quickly changing context, but you're completely and abruptly abandoning whatever it was you were doing mid-thought. And it just kind of hangs there open. And you can return to that at any moment. And there's nothing around that causes you to have to be conscious about it. You're just instantly somewhere else, and then somewhere else, and then you're back, and then somewhere else. And it just kind of flitting around. It's as if you're sitting there reading a book, and then the second the impulse even hits you, you warp yourself to your friend's house and you're talking to them. And then the second that they are boring, you warp yourself somewhere else. And then you're back at the book for another second, and then whatever. This was something Steve Jobs described very explicitly in the early days of the iPhone. It was part of the guidelines for uploading an app to the App Store, which I did, so I was familiar with this. It was, assume that users are going to use your app for a couple seconds, and it needs to start up in the time it takes to animate it on screen. Because this is what has to happen on a, like, we're designing it this way, is that a user needs to be able to interact unconsciously. Just you tap something with your finger and it's there, and then you leave, and then you're back, and then you're somewhere else. Like, that's what we're building it for. And so what I'm trying to do with my computer is to do exactly the opposite of that, and not let it, or design an environment where you can't do this, where it feels much more like the physical world. So I'm trying to think if there's anything I missed here. I think that's pretty much the gist of it. I have keyboard only mode. I have very limited screen real estate. Go ahead.
But, well, all of this is to fight off. I guess we're recognizing that there is sort of these two separate processes. One is you and what you actually want. Like, you sitting down, you think, okay, I'm done reading the book. I want to read to the end of this chapter. Then I will close the book, and then I will go do something else. That is sort of your higher brain. Like, that's sort of the real you.
Yeah.
But then there's this other you that just, if a flashing red light appeared while you're reading, you look at the light. And then if it says, follow me down this hallway, then you follow down the hall. Like, you follow things that are urgent or on fire or flashing red or whatever. Like, there is a part of you, the other lower part of your brain that just kind of jumps to things. It's and so if you're on a computer, there's a red notification. You have to click it because you want it to go away, and then you're sucked into that world. And then there's another flashing red light, and you go to that one and that one, and then you're constantly context switching and running into a lot of issues. This is what I go through at work. I'm trying to do my actual job, and then I'm getting email notifications, meeting invites, messages on Teams, and like, alert, do your hours, and I get like 10 different notifications to do my hours, and it hurts me. And that being in that state of mind for 8 hours a day sucks, like really sucks. And when I leave that, I am exhausted, mentally just destroyed because of all of that switching, and it hurts my ability to focus on things. It hurts my attention span. And so all of this stuff that you're doing is an attempt to serve the higher brain, the one that's more patient and knows better what it wants, and put off the lower part, which just follows urgent things, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I that lower part, that follow urgent things impulse, I think that historically that's really important. You
Right,
aren't
we
supposed
talked
to
about
get
this. Yeah.
If you're so sucked into a book that you can't respond to the guy with the gun who walks in your room, that's bad. You're gonna die. You aren't gonna get to pass on your genes. But we don't live in that environment for the most part. We live in this tech environment where all these things are simulated, where there's these kind of fake emergencies or things that feel very urgent or just novel. It doesn't matter. But that is there in our brains. And so the intention here is not to try and change the nature of my brain. The intention here is to change the environment that I am existing in.
And I think that is important to note, because most people jump to, I need to be better. I need to not get distracted. Just focus. Well, how the hell can you focus if there's all of these flashing red lights going off and everyone just screaming at you? You can't. So try to change the environment so that doesn't happen. But it's like, in the name of efficiency and technology, let's keep throwing flashing lights at people and then wonder why they're frustrated.
Yeah. And I had a small epiphany here too. So I have notifications on my computer that it'll pop up in the top right corner and show, a little notification if I get a Discord message or some other kind of message. And this is off entirely for the, safe mode where I can't, the what I'm describing here. In fact, it doesn't even need to be off, because a program can't be running unless it's on screen and in front of me. So nothing could show a notification because it has to be off unless I'm seeing it. Right. So that doesn't even make any sense. But I realize this. If I'm focused on something and I get a notification, sometimes I'm in a state of mind where I ignore it. It's like I don't even see it. I'm
Right.
just really working on a problem. I'm very focused. And so I think, oh, that's awesome. I'm using my willpower. I'm able to ignore the distractions. That's great. That's a really great state of mind. And other times I can't. I see the notification and I read it and I'm thinking about it. Doesn't matter what it is. It just enters my brain and then that's what my brain's thinking about. And I have to kind of pull myself back to what I was working on. And so I think, I'm distracted. I'm not being disciplined. I'm not focusing as well. But that's dumb because you exist in different states of focus. I can be very, very focused. I can get too focused where I become hyper focused and fixated on something where I can't bring myself away. I can't stop thinking about it. It becomes extremely fatiguing and frustrating, and I usually make major mistakes. I miss the forest for the trees type of mistakes. So
Right.
that is the type of focus where I'm ignoring everything else. I can't see the world around me. And that's appropriate for the right times to the right degree. Being very focused can be a good thing, but you can be too focused. You could be in that state for too long. That just is a state that you can exist in. And yes, in that state, it's pretty easy to ignore stuff. But the thing that I have found is that that state for too long will completely fries my brain. And it's become very important to get out of that state and try to get back into diffuse mode where I'm seeing the big picture. I'm thinking about everything. I'm letting my brain use different circuits and relax and kind of get back to a more neutral state. And then I could maybe go through another cycle of becoming more focused. That's the healthiest way to operate that I found. In that diffuse state, the whole idea is that you're paying attention to everything. You're seeing all the stuff around you. And in that state, if something pops up and demands your attention, you're going to see it. That's the whole point, is that you're paying attention to everything around you. So you need to have an environment where you can pay attention to everything in this calm, peaceful way where you do notice. I've been practicing just stopping and trying to hear everything around me, hear distant little conversations and cars going by. This is something I heard in a little meditation, like a guided meditation session. And I think it's fantastic because it's this really great way of trying to expand your awareness, process what's around you. And it's very relaxing. It really gets your brain, in the opposite direction of that super intense hyper focus mode. But if you're in an environment where you have a bunch of noise, notifications that are demanding your attention that have some emotional weight to them, then when you try to do this, you don't get that effect. You aren't relaxed. It's kind of pulling you right back into something fixated. Anyway,
Right.
that was a major revelation for me, was realizing that I need to be able to be in a state where I'm paying attention to everything, and those things that I'm paying attention to are relaxing and not emotional and demanding. And the fact that when I see a notification pop up, it distracts me. Again, it doesn't tend to happen in hyper focus mode, but the fact that it distracts me is nothing to do with me being weak or having bad willpower. It's that I'm just in a bad environment. That shouldn't happen unless I want it to happen, and I know that that's going to be okay.
Right.
So, okay. So to kind of wrap up the desktop thing, I have this environment now where, as I said, there's no other dimension to it. What you see on the screen is what you get. And it's very restricted in terms of what you can do. Like I said, there's no mouse to use. And if you want to open a program to use it, it has to displace what's on the screen. So you have to, you're very limited on what you can put in front of you. Again, nothing can run in the background. So if I close it, then it's gone. And if I start trying to add more, if I have 3 programs, they're all very tiny and cramped. And so I have to close something. And the act of being forced to close something, say I have my work in front of me, some piece of coding document or file that I'm working on. if I want to open up the browser, and again, there's no mouse, so it's kind of hard to use, but if I decide to do it anyway, I have to close that out if I want to see the browser in full, which means I have to make the conscious choice of I'm not going to be coding right now. I'm getting rid of this, and instead I'm browsing some stupid website. And that becomes a very conscious decision. And to me, it feels very similar to that act of, okay, I'm going to close the book, get up and do something else. And that feels just psychologically very different from, oh, I'm just going to do this for a second, or oh, I'm going to open this other tab and do some other random thing. That's that infinite personal bubble experience that tech is kind of built to deliver to you. So this sparks joy. This is nice. I work like this for a couple hours, and I do not excuse me, I do not experience the effects that I get when I'm having the full-blown raw unfiltered computer experience. It feels very good. I feel focused. I don't feel like I'm getting dragged in a million directions. And I walk away from it going, yeah, that was great. I can use the computer in the same way that I could sit down and use an e-reader and feel really good about the e-reader. So it has been a smashing success for me. It's worked super, super well.
So for all these things that, I'm trying to think, well, okay, what could I do at work to kind of help this? And, a couple quick things I come to is, oh, well, maybe I could only use Teams from 11:30 to 12 or something like that. I close out of the program and I'll just do that. But I know that if it's a decision thing, where if this is a rule that I'm making on my own, like, okay, just don't open it, use your willpower, don't open it until 11:30. I know that eventually I will crack and I will go right back to default and just open it whenever. The benefit of what you have is that it's definite, right? I mean, all of this stuff is kind of set in stone. You can't really change it unless you sort of reprogram everything. And I think that is the way to go in every case that you can for building a good environment. The less things you can build on your own decisions and willpower, the better. So I'll have to think about some things, but
100% agree. But I will say, I still have, crazy mode on my computer where I can open 12 different workspaces with a million different things running in the background. That still is there. And I do use it sometimes. It's just, I have to close out of safe mode and log out and then log back in. And it's a process. And so I do rely on myself to have enough foresight and willpower to enter the correct mode, first thing in the morning to start work. I have the option of going into crazy mode, but I don't. So there is a choice there, but it's very different to me is that it's not the infinite choice. It's not the at any second now I could decide to open the web browser and start getting lost. It's the singular choice of I can do this or I can do that. I take a fork in the road. So there is a choice there, but it's very, very simple and limited. And I think this is pretty similar to what you described, where your computer powers off in 14 minutes and you could always power it back on. There's nothing stopping you from pressing the button. It's just kind of a pain, and it requires a conscious choice where if just walking into the room and pressing a button on the keyboard, that's still a choice, but it's much smaller. And it falls under this threshold of requiring some friction in order to get this result.
The other thing is, and this happened the other night, I'm on the computer, which I rarely on the computer anymore, but I was on the computer, it was kind of late, and I'm going on some rabbit trail researching this thing or looking at, all this stuff that seems so important. All of a sudden my computer just boom, shuts off. And all of a sudden you're in diffuse mode and you go, oh, yeah, I should probably go to bed. This isn't important at all. And so you just walk away and you continue with your life. But like when you're in that mode of just, oh, this is important, that's important, this is so important, and you just keep chasing all these things, it's amazing because you can't step out. There's no reason for your brain to step out. You totally lose perspective.
Mm-hmm. A good test of that. Another thing that I've been doing for a while, we've discussed this, I think, is using the distraction sheet. So if I'm working on something and I get an impulse to, I should
Right.
go see if there's any new smartwatches to buy, or I should go check on this random thing. I get this impulse and it feels very strong. It feels like this is important. This is more important than what I'm
Right.
doing. I really need to know this. I really need to buy this thing. Feels strong. And so I just write it down. I have a almost every day. I have this little text file, and you could do this on the journal too. I do it sometimes there, where I write down all those little distractions during the Pomodoro or during the session, whatever. And then the rule is, okay, once it's done, once I've finished being focused on the thing, then I can go do all that stuff I want. And I would say 10%, maybe 20% of those
Right.
seem even remotely appealing at the end of the session, where I'm like, why did I want that? That's stupid. I'm not going to
See,
buy that right now.
and this is why having everything at your fingertips can be really
Mm-hmm.
bad, because humans need time to think to
Yeah.
make a decision. They shouldn't be able to make every decision instantly. You shouldn't have this all-powerful thing that as soon as you have an impulse, it just happens.
Right.
That sounds good in theory. Oh, great, we've evolved and we have, everything's going great. But it's not, because it's actually a bad thing. If you have everything you want instantly, then you lose all fulfillment in actually getting the things that you want. Yeah, and it completely removes your ability to just think about a decision. Whereas back in the day, you would have to, oh, I want this thing. Then I have to go to a store to get this
Mhm.
thing. And then I have to think about whether or not I want to pay that amount of money or whatever. You have all of these stops in place, these checkpoints where you verify your decision. We don't have that anymore. It's, oh, I need this book. This is the secret to my success. Okay, I'll just buy it. It'll be here in 2 days. It shows up in 2 days. You're like, I don't even remember ordering this thing.
Yep.
That's
That has happened quite a bit.
mosquito keeps. Anyway. All right, we have 10 minutes left. I'm sure that you have more that you wanted to say. So,
I do, but none of it fits in 10 minutes. Well, let me say this. I feel like a little bit of a crazy person. I've spent a lot of time on this. I've really been trying to get this figured out, and there's things that I keep running into that are just, it almost feels like random chance that it works or it doesn't work. The way that I can access Discord through a terminal, that actually is nice, because sometimes I do want to send messages on Discord. I communicate on there pretty often, and so to me, that's one of those things where I want it to work in safe mode, because I do need that or want that sometimes. But this is, Discord doesn't want this to exist. It's not allowed. I'm breaking the terms of service by doing this. And the guy who wrote it is just some nerd who decided to make it. And it happens to work. And so I'm able to do this. But normally you have to use Discord in full on graphical mode. And as much as I do like Discord as a platform, I think it's generally people talking to people, which is awesome. It's still very distracting. There's those little white triangles, and I'm always clicking on them and getting sucked into whatever. But the point here is this, that I don't think there are more than a handful of human beings who even think about this. Tech has evolved. I remember the original announcement speech from Steve Jobs showing off the iPhone. And it was astounding. And he's showing off how amazing. And at the time, it seems dated now, but at the time, it was incredible. This thing where you could just scroll around freely on this big pane of glass, and it just, the touch interface worked everywhere, and it had an internet browser and music and everything. And you watch any product announcement since then, no one gives a shit about this. Nobody cares that this stuff has this property to it where it causes so much distraction and anxiety, or at least it can for some of us. I know for a fact that some people do not have an issue with this, and that's amazing. But some of us do.
I
Well,
disagree.
okay.
I don't even want to go on that rant. Continue.
Nobody thinks about this. This is not the perspective that any company takes, because if you're Facebook, you make money by obviously advertising, but that comes from people spending time on your site. Monthly active users and time on site. Those are the only two metrics that any company on earth cares about. User happiness is not a metric. No one cares about that. It's easily observed. We know that the more you use Facebook, the less happy you are. There's a direct relationship between those two things. Doesn't matter. No one cares. That I feel like kind of a Twilight Zone crazy person because I'm trying to do stuff that clearly is not meant to be done by the people designing these things. Now, I happen to be on Linux, which has its own problems, but it's very flexible, very configurable, and I appreciate that very much about it. So I'm able to experiment with some of these things, but Windows isn't set up that way. macOS is not set up that way because no one cares. And you mentioned a while ago, earlier in the episode, how there's these, focus timers and screen time and that kind of thing on a phone. According to my current belief and mental model for this, that stuff does absolutely nothing to solve the real problem. All it does, I know that some people do see some benefit there, and I'm sure there is, but to me, it's absolutely paltry. It's really just a way of guilting you. All it really does is say, hey, you're wasting a lot of time, but it doesn't change the environment in a meaningful way where you aren't just getting constantly pulled away into one thing and another. And the entire device and every service on there is designed to do that to you. Because again, it's what those companies profit from. It just doesn't solve the problem. So I don't know how to do this on a phone, like create an environment that works the way that I've gotten the desktop to work. So that's why my solution for the phone has mostly been to just use it minimally and figure out a way to get the important things. And for the most part, just leave it kind of plugged in somewhere. I wish I could use it more freely and not feel like I'm suffering from this problem, but I haven't figured that out yet. But I have been able to configure a desktop in a way that actually feels pretty good. And I'm probably still more to work on, but I'm really happy with it.
Well, with all the technology, everything is more efficient, and you have everything at your fingertips, right? And when Steve Jobs made that announcement, it's like, how can this be a bad thing?
Right.
You have more stuff in one place. It's easier. It's better. But to me, it's like finding a poor child on the street, and you give them $1, and you're like, oh, that's really sweet that you gave them $1, whatever. Okay, well, now give them $10. And you're like, oh, that's even greater. Well, now give them $100. Give them $1,000. Give them $10 million. Hand them $1 billion. Okay, and now all of a sudden that good thing becomes a very dangerous thing.
Yeah,
they could buy, I don't know, all the candy they want, all the bad food they want. They can buy, I don't know, cars. They can buy houses. They can buy anything they want, and they will run them like a 6-year-old kid. They will run themselves into all kinds of trouble, and it's a really bad thing. Well, now, as humans, we have everything, and we're getting more. Hooray, right. ChatGPT, can't wait until AI just gives us everything. And we don't even stop for a second to think, oh my God, maybe this isn't the way things are supposed to work. Now, to be fair, I don't actually know how they should work. And that was one question I wanted to ask you, which we clearly can't get to, but if you could construct your own world with the tools we have at hand, the technology we have, what would it look like? Yeah. I mean, what would it really look like? Because I see all these things and I'm thinking, this is awful, guys. Why can't we look at this and realize that? But I also don't have, the answers. I don't know how it should be. Not that anyone would listen to me, even if I did figure it all out, but it's a genuine question of what would your world look like? Because we clearly take advantage of some of the benefits of technology and then complain about the bad stuff. But
right.
How should it work?
Well, that's a great question, and that we can maybe, that'd be a cool follow-up question we can maybe talk about. But let me just,
to ask everyone else, what would your world look like? How should tech be run? What level of comfort should we be at? And then what should we actually still do as humans? If we can have it all,
yeah,
whatever.
No, that's That's a great question. I think it would be fun to talk about that from that angle soon. My extremely short answer would be this, and maybe just a little bit of advice. I think everybody is slowly starting to wake up to how powerful this stuff is and the effects that it has on people. We've really pointed the finger at social media a lot, you and I included, along with the rest of the world, but those are just examples of something that happens. I am off social media entirely, and I still suffer from these issues. It it's super important. I think it's going to be really clear very soon how truly important it is, although there's already plenty of science to back this up. And I think it is worth really thinking about for you. Some people maybe don't suffer from this very much. Others, if you're like me, it's a major thing. And I have heard people say that it is destroying their life in every conceivable way. So it is worth thinking really hard about how you want to deal with this stuff. And maybe my mental model is off and maybe you have something better, and that's awesome. Tell us about it, and I would love to hear about that. But take the problem very seriously and do whatever you need to do. We'll leave with that because Daniel's computer is about to shut off. Goodbye.